Hi, I'm Jenny Ray LaRue, the Managing Director of Management Consulted, and I'm here with All-Star Lisa Bright. Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
Excited to walk through with you an example of a case interview structure. And we thought it would be fun to put this together just so that people could kind of see something that Management Consulted really brings to the table distinctively, which is that we have 4 clear basic structures, but we don't necessarily recommend adhering to these magical structures. We use them as a baseline and then ask people to go beyond that. So I'm going to give you a prompt, and then the prompt can actually go in a lot of different directions. You could use more than one of the basic structures with it, but I'm interested in just having you kind of lay out for us what you're going to do. People will be able to see what you actually have going on the paper at the same time, which will be really fun. And then I'll have you take the time to review the prompt, go through the structure, read it back to me, and then we'll discuss it a little bit.
Okay.
That sound good?
I can read my writing. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you can draw largely in this situation because we actually have quite a bit of space and time, and we're only doing the structure, so we don't have to go beyond
I'm going to do that on a separate page then.
Okay, fantastic.
Sounds good.
So let me just give you the background of the case. Our client is a U.S. car manufacturer. They have seen lagging performance in the last couple of years. They're battling to both sell cars and also to manufacture profitably. Our client is interested in a way to revive their business by doing something innovative. One of the ideas that they've looked at is to launch a sports car. They have none currently in their line. And they're interested in understanding what kinds of things they would need to think about in order to do this successfully. And ultimately, they'd like a recommendation of whether or not they should pursue the sports car idea. Do you have any questions about the background?
All right, so let me just recap this really quick. So it sounds like we have a U.S. car manufacturer. You said they've been lagging performance. I had a question mark there, but I think you said they're lagging in terms of selling cars, so they're lagging on the sales side, and then also in manufacturing profitably.
That's right.
I believe you said. Okay. So they're having both top line and bottom line issues, it appears.
Seems to be that way, unfortunately.
Okay. They want to look at reviving through innovation.
Yep.
Specifically a sports car. They don't currently have any, and they're thinking about launching this new line of vehicle. And they want to know what they should think about in terms of making that decision. Do they want to think about how they'd go about it too, or just kind of like determining whether or not it's a good idea, or kind of a mix of the two?
Yeah. They're interested in basically ultimately the final recommendation, which is yes or no. So I think putting some practical steps to it could be important for that.
Okay. Great. So I think I have a pretty clear idea of the prompt. The only other thing I would ask is, do they have any certain targets in mind? So it seems like I said, they're having top line and bottom line issues. Do they have targets in mind that they would like for us to achieve?
It's just really important that it doesn't just help them move more units and then in some way eliminate profitability, right? So they have to really keep both of those in tandem in mind.
Got it. Okay, I think I have a pretty clear idea of the prompt. If you don't mind, I'll just take a moment to gather my thoughts.
Yes, take your time.
Okay, I think I've got a plan of how I want to approach this.
Great.
So since our client's a car manufacturer, they're interested in launching and designing a new sports car. They want to know if that's a good idea, and if so, how they would go about it, both from increasing top line revenue as well as keeping in mind that they want to be more profitable as well.
Yep.
I think there are 4 key areas that I'd like to look into, or 4 key questions that we need to ask to determine if that's a good idea and how they go about it. So first of all, I'd want to look at the overall market attractiveness for sports cars to really determine if that is an attractive market our client should want to pursue or not. If that's the case, then I want to better understand this car manufacturer's capabilities. It might be a great opportunity. That doesn't mean they can actually capture that. So we want to look more closely at that. And then third, I'd want to more closely understand the profitability of the sports car, because since they're considering the bottom line as well. And then if all of that looks good, I want to think about a go-to-market strategy for our client and how we provide some next steps in terms of how they'd go about it. So to start off with the market attractiveness, I do want to look at the broader economy. I'm thinking sports cars require some discretionary income. It's kind of a luxury good, so I want to make sure they're launching this in a good economy moving forward. Overall size and growth of the market in terms of what kind of revenues we think we could generate, what the key trends are, who are the main competitors, what kind of sports cars do they have planned for future launches, so we can think about how we position ourselves and what that's going to look like moving forward. And then also regulatory issues. I know Volkswagen recently had some issues with their sports cars, with fuel economy and emission standards and things like that. So I think this is a bit different from a typical vehicle. We might want to consider things like that.
Okay.
In terms of our capabilities, so I want to look at branding. For example, Cadillac, huge shift in rebranding over the last few years to sell the types of cars that they do.
Yep.
Financing ability, hundreds of millions of dollars go into designing new vehicles. Can we afford it? Then basically their entire value chain, all the way from R&D through sourcing, all the way through to the end of distribution. So that full process. I think that this type of product launch is going to affect everything. So do they have the capabilities, the resources, capacity, et cetera? Yep. And then also, if we can't do that, do we need to explore like M&A type activity or something like that to execute? I think we really want to focus on the profitability of the sports car. That's one of their big concerns. So ultimately, I'm looking for like a break even or a return on investment that we could calculate. So we need to look at both the revenues and the costs, what kind of price points we think we could get. Based on the market attractiveness, some data that we get there could inform how many units we think we can push. And then also our capabilities can help inform what our cost structure would look like for this. And then overall, looking at the go-to-market strategy, I want to understand who we're targeting, what kind of segments are we going after and their demographics. And I think that can help inform how we market and how we distribute our products. So for example, are we going to go with like high-end dealerships or something like that compared to what we do today? So I think that's broadly how I'd like to attack this. And I think the big first question would be, is this market attractive? So I'd like to dive into understanding more about kind of the size and growth of the market.
Fantastic. All right, relax.
All right.
All right, so that was amazing, really good. I just want to point out a couple of things that you did across the board, and then maybe tweaking things if somebody's thinking, wow, that was really good, but they still want to take it to the next level. So overall, you did a great job on the recap. I thought, did an amazing job of synthesizing. You went through in a linear fashion, but you really tied everything together, so it didn't feel like a complete repeat of what I had talked about, and you did some interpretation as you were going, which was great. Awesome. And then your clarifying questions were spot on. You really only asked 2 of them. One of them was just around the how, which was kind of a very like loose and tangible question, but helped inform your structure that you ended up choosing, because that whole 4th bucket actually was really informed by that. And then the second one was around whether you were going, we were going to define success, which also defined one of your buckets, the profitability bucket. And so I really liked that your questions were clear. They didn't ask me for new data, but they were clearly informed what your structure was going to be. And so I think you picked good questions related to that. I liked the fact that your structure was 4 buckets. I also really liked the fact that these buckets were some of the typical buckets, but you called them something a little different. And so this felt like a creative structure to me. But it felt creative, however, not disorganized, because you had 4 clear buckets, and then each of your buckets, I can even see on your paper, are very clearly delineated. So I liked the combination of creativity and clarity here. I thought you did a great job of balancing this. And then inside the buckets, I thought that they were really good. This kind of case lends itself to the question mark of the Mises structure. And I thought you did a great job of demonstrating that whether it is mutually exclusive is pretty important. And so you didn't really have anything here that you would look at twice. But collectively exhaustive is a little harder to do. However, what you did was you tied some of the pieces together, which made it feel feel like it was more integrated and complete. So across the board, I think that was also really strong. Then you had in market attractiveness and capabilities, not just a sense of the buckets, but also a sense of their priority. And so one of my favorite things was that at the end, when you came back and you said where you wanted to start, it was bucket number 1. I see that a lot. You probably do too, where people lay things out and then they say bucket number 3 seems like a great place to start. And you think, what in the world? And what yours happened to actually be the first one that you would come up with and the first one on your page. But as you know, it doesn't have to be that way.
You can always like renumber them. Or
exactly.
Like
So I just thought overall the overarching structure was good and the prioritization was really good. Inside the actual information, you explained very clearly and I think an appropriate segmentation. So you spent an approximate equal amount of time on each one of those key buckets. So that was great because it wasn't like, oh, this is the really important one and then here's 10 seconds on the other one. So
and it depends on the prompt too. If it
absolutely.
really emphasized one piece or another, I probably would have dove into more detail in one of those, but it seemed pretty open-ended. There was very little direction as to where the focus should be.
And even in that situation, you might have broken up that big question into smaller questions and kind of ended up in the same place. So I felt like the only thing I wanted to point out something that you did really well and then something that I think could be just a next level option.
Okay.
So when you were talking about the different things, there were a couple of places in every bucket you had something that was metric oriented. So you had size and growth of the market for market attractiveness, capabilities, you had the M&A question, and you had the cost across the value chain. For profitability, you had the break even and ROE, the number that you were looking for. And then for the go-to-market, you had the segments and the demographics. The only thing that I would recommend, and just something that I found has been really helpful for people to be clear, regardless of the case type you're doing, right? This is a pretty general one. You could get this at McKinsey. It's a little less likely. McKinsey's would probably be a little bit more data rich even in the beginning. This is probably more of a BCG style case. And so in that situation, if you're going to have to be in the driver's seat in order to get the data, I just usually recommend that they put that number first. So that the first thing that you gather is the data and the information, and then everything else is kind of context that surrounds it. So that was really, out of everything, just one recommendation that I had to kind of make it a little bit more clear.
And one thing I wanted to point out too is my 4 buckets actually really align to one of the frameworks. So you've got market attractiveness, meaning kind of your market competition type category. Your car manufacturer being the company bucket. And then you've got profitability of the sports car. I kind of tweaked the product bucket a little bit. Said,
that's
focus
great.
on profits of that.
Ultimately, though, product would really make sense for that. And when people talk about features of the product without driving to profitability, it doesn't end up making sense. So
So I could have added more of that, but I was like, I think let's just keep it profits for this one. But I could have dove in a little bit more there. And then go-to-market strategy kind of being the customer focus. So it does kind of align to one of the key strategy frameworks.
Absolutely.
The strategy framework, but it just is tweaked in terms of wording, so it seems more creative.
And also in terms of order, right? Sometimes you would see market first, then you would see customer or market and competition, and then customer, and then company and product. So the fact that you switched it around, I thought was amazing.
Awesome.
Awesome. Great job.
Thanks.